Look, I'm not saying the galaxy's religious ceremonies are boring, but when you've watched 987 consecutive warriors get rejected by a glowing sword, you start to wonder if maybe the sword is just picky for the sake of being picky. The planet Carthex Prime took its sacred duties very seriously. Too seriously if you asked anyone with a functioning sense of humor, which unfortunately nobody did. The entire population had gathered in the Grand Plaza of Infinite Waiting, which was named with stunning accuracy, to watch yet another hopeful warrior attempt to claim the sacred blade of infinite destiny. High Priestess Valara stood at the center of the plaza, her 6 arms raised in what she probably thought was an inspiring pose, but mostly looked like she was trying to direct traffic. Her ceremonial robes shimmered with every color that had ever made anyone nauseous, and her voice carried across the crowd with the kind of projection that suggested she'd never heard of indoor voices. "Behold," she announced for what had to be the 1,000th time in her career, as Commander Throck of the Crimson Legions approaches the blade that shall determine the fate of all sentient beings. Commander Throck, a 4-armed warrior who looked like someone had given a bear too many limbs, and anger management issues, stepped forward with the kind of confidence that comes from winning every fight you've ever been in. He reached for the blade with all 4 hands, his muscles tensing, his 3 eyes narrowing in concentration. The blade didn't even flicker. It just sat there on its fancy pedestal, glowing with the same ambient light it had been producing for the past 1,000 years, completely unimpressed. Throke's confidence evaporated faster than water on a hot reactor core. His shoulders slumped, his extra arms drooped, and he shuffled away looking like someone had just told him his entire military career was a participation trophy. "The blade has spoken," Valara intoned, which was a weird way to describe a sword doing absolutely nothing, but nobody interrupted her. "The chosen one has not yet arrived." That's when Jake Morrison's cargo ship decided to make its entrance by falling out of the sky like a drunk meteor. To be fair to Jake, the navigation error wasn't entirely his fault. Sure, he'd been trying to update the ship's systems while eating a sandwich and watching a sports replay, but the asteroid field hadn't been marked on any of his charts. The subsequent collision, emergency thrust burn, and uncontrolled descent into Carthex Prime's atmosphere were just the universe's way of saying his multitasking skills needed work. The ship crashed into the plaza's outer gardens with all the grace of a dropped toolbox, sending ceremonial flower arrangements flying and carving an impressive trench through what had probably been very expensive landscaping. Jake stumbled out of the smoking wreckage, coughing and waving away the smoke. He was wearing a stained jumpsuit that had seen better decades. His hair was sticking up in directions hair shouldn't stick, and he had the expression of a man who'd just realized his insurance definitely didn't cover crash landing on holy worlds. "Okay," he said to nobody in particular. "Anyone know where I can find a mechanic? And maybe a bathroom? Long flight." The entire assembled population of Carthex Prime stared at him in silence. Valara's eye twitched. "You have interrupted the sacred ceremony of blade selection with your presence." "Cool, cool," Jake said, clearly not listening as he examined a piece of his ship's hull that had fallen off. "Look, I just need to patch this up and I'll be out of your hair. Or tentacles. Or whatever you've got going on up there." "This is a holy sight," Valara continued, her voice rising. "You cannot simply—" "Is that a sword?" Jake interrupted, pointing at the sacred blade. "That's a pretty nice sword. Anyway, mechanic, bathroom, maybe some food? I'm not picky." Commander Throck, still processing his rejection and now watching this weird 2-armed alien treat the most important religious ceremony in the galaxy like a minor inconvenience, made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a sob. Jake noticed the big warrior for the first time. "Hey man, you okay? You look like you need a hug. Or several hugs. You've got enough arms for it." And that's when things got weird. Security Chief Gornak appeared out of nowhere, which was impressive considering he was roughly the size of a compact shuttle. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, which meant he was built like a tank that had been compressed into the shape of a very angry refrigerator. He also took his job protecting the sacred sites way too seriously, which was saying something on a planet where everyone took everything too seriously. "Halt, intruder," Gornak announced, his hand moving to the ceremonial weapon at his belt that definitely wasn't just ceremonial. "Oh, good security," Jake said with genuine relief. Listen, I need to report a crash. My crash. Just now. You probably heard it. I'm gonna need some forms or whatever you guys use here. Gornak looked confused, which on his face mostly involved his forehead ridges moving closer together. You will be detained for violating sacred space. I mean, sure, detain me near a charging station if you've got one. My communicator's dead and I need to call my dispatcher. Valara floated forward because apparently her species could just do that when they wanted to be extra dramatic. You do not understand the gravity of your intrusion, human. Human? Jake looked surprised. How'd you know I'm human? We have extensive databases on all species. Professor Cleet piped up from the crowd. He was a small, nervous-looking creature covered in what might have been fur or might have been really enthusiastic moss. He wore approximately 17 different pairs of glasses, all stacked on top of each other. Humans are known for their unusual approach to established protocols and their tendency to ignore warning signs. That's fair, Jake admitted. So, about that mechanic? Valara made a sound like a deflating balloon being strangled. You will listen to the history of the sacred blade before you are escorted off-world. Is this going to take long? Because I've got a delivery deadline and... The sacred blade of infinite destiny, Valara began, completely ignoring him, was forged in the heart of a dying star by the Ancient Ones 10,000 years ago. It was created to choose the one true warrior who would unite the galaxy against the coming darkness and bring about an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. Jake looked at his wrist, where a watch would be if he hadn't pawned it 3 months ago. Uh-huh. The blade contains the wisdom of 1,000 civilizations and the power to reshape reality itself. It can only be wielded by one whose heart is pure, whose courage is without question, and whose destiny is intertwined with the fate of all living things. Great, cool, very epic, Jake said. Does it have Wi-Fi? Because I really need to send a message. Professor Cleet gasped. He asks if the sacred blade has Wi-Fi, the sacred blade, as if it were a common data hub. I mean, if it's got all that wisdom you mentioned, seems like it should have internet access at minimum. Throck, who had been sitting on a nearby bench having what looked like a full existential crisis, suddenly laughed. It was a broken, slightly unhinged sound. He thinks the blade should have Wi-Fi. That's wonderful. That's just perfect. Valara's 6 arms began gesticulating wildly. The prophecy states that the Chosen One will appear in our hour of greatest need, will show no fear in the face of the blade's judgment, and will possess qualities never before seen in those who sought its power. Okay, but what does the blade actually do? Jake asked. Besides glow. My cargo hold lights glow too, and they cost way less than whatever you're spending on this whole setup. It grants the wielder unimaginable power, Valara said through what sounded like gritted teeth, though Jake wasn't sure if her species had teeth. Unimaginable? So nobody knows what it does? We know exactly what it does. It's just unimaginable to lesser minds. So you can imagine it. Yes. Then it's not unimaginable. Professor Cleet started scribbling notes frantically. Fascinating logical analysis. Completely wrong context, but fascinating. Gornak stepped closer to Jake, looming in a way that suggested he'd practiced looming in a mirror. The human will cease his questions and show proper respect. Look, buddy, I respect all kinds of things. Personal space, for instance. You're kind of violating mine right now. You cannot simply walk into the plaza of infinite waiting and, I didn't walk, I crashed. There's a difference. Walking implies I had a choice. Valara closed her eyes, which was unsettling because she had way more than 2 of them. The sacred texts say that 988 warriors must be rejected before the true Chosen One arrives. So you need one more person to fail? Jake asked. Yes, well, no. The prophecy is unclear on whether it's consecutive or cumulative rejections. Has anyone just asked the sword? The entire plaza went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop, which was probably just coincidence but felt appropriately dramatic. Asked the sword, Valara repeated slowly. Yeah. I mean, if it's so powerful and wise, it can probably talk, right? Professor Cleet's glasses all fell off at once. In 10,000 years of recorded history across 147 different civilizations' interactions with the blade, nobody has thought to simply ask it questions. Maybe that's your problem right there, Jake said. Anyway, I'm gonna go look for that mechanic now. You guys seem busy with your whole sword situation. He started walking toward the plaza's exit, which meant he had to walk past the sacred blade. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was not paying attention to the ceremonial incense burners that were absolutely everywhere for some reason. Jake's foot caught on an incense burner. He stumbled forward, arms windmilling, and crashed directly into the sacred blade's pedestal. The blade, which had been sitting there minding its own business for 1,000 years, tipped forward. Jake, operating on pure instinct and having broken enough cargo during his career to know the sound of something expensive about to hit the ground, reached out and caught it. The sacred blade of infinite destiny touched human hands for the first time in its 10,000-year existence. And then things got really weird. The blade didn't just glow. It went full supernova disco ball. Light exploded from it in every color that existed, and several that were still in beta testing. Ancient mechanisms hidden beneath the plaza roared to life with the sound of 1,000 machines that really should have been oiled at some point in the last millennium. Jake yelped and tried to drop the sword, but it stuck to his hands like he'd grabbed it with superglue. "Ah," he said eloquently. "This is new." The ground beneath the plaza split open, revealing a chamber that definitely violated several building codes. Holographic projections burst into the air, showing star maps and what looked like really aggressive PowerPoint presentations. Ancient speakers crackled to life and began playing what might have been music or might have been the sound of civilizations screaming. It was hard to tell. Valara dropped to her knees. All 6 of them. The prophecy is fulfilled. The chosen one has arrived. "No, no, no," Jake protested, still trying to let go of the sword. "I'm not chosen. I'm not even a good choice for employee of the month. I just didn't want your fancy sword to break." But the blade wasn't listening. It pulsed with energy, and suddenly Jake knew things. Terrible things. Important things. Things about the blade's purpose and history that he absolutely did not want to know because they sounded like responsibility. Commander Throck was still on his bench, but now he was laughing hysterically. Of course it's the human who doesn't even want it. That's perfect. The universe has a sense of humor after all. The entire population of Carthex Prime began bowing. Not just the ones in the plaza, but everyone, everywhere on the planet, as if they'd all received the same memo simultaneously. Gornak was bowing so hard his face was pressed into the ground. "Forgive me, Chosen One. I did not recognize your glory." "My glory is mostly coffee stains and poor life choices," Jake said. "Can someone please help me put this thing down?" Professor Cleet was frantically taking notes while also bowing, which seemed difficult, but he was managing. "Remarkable. The blade has never demonstrated this level of response. The energy readings are off every known scale." "That sounds bad. Is that bad? Someone tell me if that's bad." Valara rose from her bow, tears streaming down her face, which was especially impressive given how many eyes she had. "You are the one foretold in ancient prophecy. You will lead us against the coming darkness. You will unite the fractured galaxy. I will literally just put this sword back and leave," Jake interrupted. "Just tell me how to let go. The sacred blade releases its chosen wielder only when their destiny is fulfilled." Jake stared at her. "You're telling me I'm stuck holding a glowing sword until I save the galaxy or whatever?" "Yes. Can I at least get a discount on ship repairs?" The crowd gasped at his audacity. Valara looked like she was having a stroke if her species could have strokes. Even Throck stopped laughing. "The Chosen One," Valara said carefully, "does not concern himself with mundane matters such as currency." "The Chosen One has bills," Jake shot back. "The Chosen One's cargo company is threatening to fire him if he doesn't complete this delivery. The Chosen One would really like to not be holding a magic sword right now." The blade pulsed again, and more information flooded Jake's mind. He learned about the blade's true purpose, about the ancient threat it was designed to combat, about the trials he was supposed to face. None of it involved getting his ship fixed or making his delivery on time. "Oh, come on," Jake groaned. You've got to be kidding me. Professor Cleet peered at him with interest. The blade is communicating with you, isn't it? What is it saying? It's saying I'm supposed to fight something called the Devourer of Worlds, unite the 16 kingdoms, and restore balance to the cosmic order. Which sounds great, except I have a shipment of agricultural equipment due on Deneb 7 by Thursday, and it's already Tuesday. The fate of trillions hangs in the balance, Valara said. Yeah, and my job hangs in the balance of me making this delivery. Can we do the galaxy-saving thing next week? The assembled crowd didn't know how to respond to that. They'd spent generations preparing for the arrival of the Chosen One, imagining a noble warrior who would accept his destiny with courage and determination. Instead, they got a cargo pilot trying to negotiate his heroic journey around his work schedule. Gornak stood up from his bow. The Chosen One will, of course, be provided with every resource we possess. Weapons, ships, warriors. How about a mechanic and a charging cable? Elite forces trained in ancient combat techniques. Seriously? Just a mechanic. Maybe some duct tape. Throck finally got up from his bench and approached Jake. Up close, he was even more intimidating, with scars that suggested he'd fought in battles that probably had their own historical documentaries. Human, he said, his voice a deep rumble. I spent 20 years preparing to claim that blade. I fasted. I meditated. I conquered 12 systems to prove my worth. And you caught it because you tripped. Yeah, Jake admitted. That's pretty much my life in a nutshell. Throck stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He started laughing again, but this time it wasn't the unhinged laughter of a broken warrior. It was genuine amusement. You know what? I like you. You're either the bravest being in the galaxy or the dumbest. Maybe both. Definitely both, Jake agreed. So, are you going to help me figure out how to put this thing down or what? The blade cannot be set down until... Yeah, destiny fulfilled, I got it. But there's got to be a loophole, right, Professor? Jake turned to Cleet. You seem like a guy who knows about loopholes. Cleet adjusted all 17 of his glasses nervously. Well, there are some interpretations of the ancient texts that suggest alternative completion criteria, but they're highly theoretical and good enough for me. What do I have to do? You have to save us from the prophesied threat. Jake looked at the sword, then at the crowd, then back at the sword. And if I do that, this thing lets go, theoretically. How long does saving the galaxy usually take? The prophecies are unclear on the timeline. Of course they are. Jake sighed. Okay, fine. What's this threat I'm supposed to fight? And can I fight it by Thursday? That's when the ground started shaking, ancient alarms began blaring, and Professor Cleet went very, very pale, which was impressive given he was mostly moss. Oh no, Cleet whispered. Oh no. What? Jake demanded. The Sacred Blade Awakening was supposed to be the signal that the threat was near. I thought we had more time. But if the blade has chosen you now, it means... The ground split open wider, revealing a massive chamber beneath the plaza. And in that chamber, something that had been sleeping for a very long time started waking up. It means what? Jake asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer. It means, Valara said, her voice barely a whisper, the threat is already here. It's been here. We built our entire civilization on top of it. You built a city on top of a doomsday weapon? In our defense, Professor Cleet said weakly, we forgot it was down there. How do you forget about a doomsday weapon? It's been 10,000 years. Things slipped through the cracks. The chamber below rumbled ominously. Lights that hadn't been on in millennia flickered to life, revealing something mechanical, massive, and probably malevolent, if the way everyone was screaming was any indication. Jake looked at the sword still stuck to his hands. You know, when I woke up this morning, this was not on my schedule. The sacred blade pulsed with what felt like agreement, or possibly amusement. It was hard to tell with magical weapons. All right, Jake said, resigned to his fate. Let's save the galaxy. But I'm billing you guys for overtime. The panic that swept through the plaza, was the kind of panic that comes from realizing your entire civilization has been having picnics on top of a bomb for 10,000 years. People were running in circles, alarms were blaring, and Valara was chanting prayers that sounded increasingly desperate. Jake, still holding the glowing sword he couldn't put down, watched the chaos with the expression of a man who'd seen his life derail before and was mostly just annoyed it was happening again. "Okay, everyone needs to calm down," he announced. Nobody listened. "Hey, tall priestess lady, Valara." Valara stopped mid-prayer. "Yes, chosen one. First, stop calling me that. It's weird. Second, what exactly is down there?" Professor Cleet pulled out a tablet that looked ancient enough to belong in a museum. "According to the records, it's a planetary reconfiguration engine. In normal person words, it turns planets into space dust. Why would anyone build that? The ancient ones were very thorough about threat elimination. They couldn't just, talk to their enemies. They tried that first. It didn't go well. So they built planet destroyers." Jake rubbed his face with his free hand, the one not stuck to a magic sword. "And let me guess, this thing activates when the sword is drawn?" "Correct. It's a security feature. A security feature that destroys planets." "Sure. Why not? This day can't get any weirder." The ground shook again, more violently this time. Mechanical sounds echoed from the depths, the kind of sounds that suggested very large things were starting to move after a very long nap. Throck stepped up next to Jake, his forearms crossed. "So, chosen one who isn't chosen, what's your plan?" "My plan was to fix my ship and deliver agricultural equipment. That plan's looking pretty dead now. I meant for stopping the doomsday machine." "Oh, that? Yeah, no, I've got nothing." Jake looked at the sword. "Hey, Magic Blade, you got any ideas? You're the one who got me into this mess." The sword pulsed, and information flooded Jake's mind again. This time it was technical readouts, system diagrams, and what looked like the galaxy's most complicated instruction manual. "Okay, apparently there's a control chamber deeper down," Jake said, interpreting the sword's psychic spam. "If I can get there, I can shut this thing down before it charges up enough to actually destroy anything." "How long do we have?" Valara asked. The sword is showing me a countdown. Looks like about 2 hours." 2 hours? Gornak's voice went up an octave. "We need to evacuate the planet." "Can't," Professor Cleet said, typing frantically on his tablet. "The engine creates a field that prevents ships from leaving. Standard Ancient One's security protocol. Very annoying. So we're trapped here until either I shut it down or we all become space dust." "Essentially, yes." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want my ship fully repaired. New hull plating, fresh reactor core, the works." Everyone stared at him. "I'm sorry," Valara said slowly. "You're negotiating payment while we're facing planetary extinction? Hey, you guys need me to save the planet, right? I'm just making sure I can actually leave once I do. Also, I want fuel, premium fuel, not that cheap stuff that gunks up the injectors. And food. Real food, not ration bars." "You're insane," Gornak muttered. "I'm practical. Plus, I'm the one holding the magic sword, which apparently makes me the boss now, so." Jake shrugged. "Also, I'm gonna need a guide. Someone who knows their way around ancient death machines." Professor Cleet raised a tentative hand. "I've studied Ancient One's technology for 3 decades. "Great, you're with me. Anyone else?" Throck grunted. "Someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally destroy us all faster. I'll come." "Awesome. Team Chosen One is assembled. Now, before we go down there, can someone explain why nobody just destroyed this thing when they found it?" The assembled leaders exchanged uncomfortable looks. "We didn't exactly find it," Valara admitted. "We knew the chamber was here. We just thought it was a temple." "You thought a doomsday weapon was a temple?" "In our defense, the Ancient Ones had very similar architectural styles for both." Jake pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay. So nobody bothered to check what was in the scary underground chamber with all the warning signs?" "The warning signs were in a dead language," Professor Cleet said defensively. We only deciphered them last century, and by then we'd already built the capital city on top of it. The economic impact of relocating would have been, you chose real estate values over not living on a bomb. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. It is bad. It's literally the worst decision I've heard this week, and I once watched a guy try to fuel his ship with cooking oil. Another rumble shook the plaza. Pieces of ancient machinery were starting to push through the ground now, all glowing with ominous red light that suggested they were not designed with safety in mind. We're wasting time, Throck said. If we're going down there, we need to go now. Fine. But I want everything I asked for, plus a written statement that this was your fault, not mine, in case my insurance company asks questions. Your insurance company? Yeah, they're already going to be mad about the crash. If they think I destroyed a planet, my premiums are going to be insane. Valara looked like she wanted to argue, but another tremor convinced her otherwise. Fine, you'll have everything you requested, just please save our world. See, was that so hard? All right, team, let's go poke a doomsday machine and hope it doesn't poke back. Jake started walking toward the gaping hole in the plaza floor, the sacred blade lighting his way. Professor Cleet and Throck followed, the former looking terrified and the latter looking like he couldn't decide if this was the best or worst decision he'd ever made. Chosen One, Valara called after them. The prophecy says you will face 3 trials before reaching the control chamber, each one designed to test your worth. Of course there are trials. Why wouldn't there be trials? Jake didn't stop walking. What are they? The trial of courage, the trial of wisdom, and the trial of sacrifice. Do they have to be done in order? The texts are unclear. Your texts are unclear about everything, you know that? They reached the edge of the chamber. Ancient stairs carved from some material that still looked pristine after 10,000 years spiraled down into darkness. The glow from Jake's sword provided the only light, casting dancing shadows on walls covered in warning symbols that everyone had successfully ignored for centuries. Last chance to turn back, Jake said, mostly to himself. The sword pulsed with what felt like encouragement or possibly impatience. Yeah, I know. Destiny and stuff. He took a breath. All right, let's go save a planet so I can make my Thursday delivery. You're still worried about your delivery? Professor Cleet asked in disbelief. If I'm going to be a hero, I'm going to be a hero who pays his bills. And with that, Jake Morrison, cargo pilot and extremely reluctant Chosen One, descended into an ancient chamber full of deadly traps and cosmic threats, still more concerned about his logistics schedule than his legendary destiny. Behind them, the population of Carthex Prime watched their savior disappear into darkness, collectively wondering if maybe the sacred blade had made a terrible mistake. The blade, for its part, was having the time of its 10,000-year existence. The stairs went down a lot farther than Jake thought stairs should reasonably go. After about 5 minutes of walking, he was pretty sure they'd gone deep enough to qualify as a different zip code. How far down is this control chamber? He asked. Approximately 3 kilometers, Professor Cleet replied, already out of breath despite his species supposedly being built for endurance. 3 kilometers of stairs. The Ancient Ones really committed to their leg day routine. Throck, who hadn't broken a sweat despite his massive size, grunted. They wanted to make sure only the worthy could reach the chamber. Or they just didn't believe in elevators. Either way, this is terrible urban planning. They finally reached the bottom, stepping into a chamber so massive that Jake's sword light couldn't reach the ceiling. The walls were covered in more warning symbols and helpful diagrams showing planets exploding, which really emphasized how seriously the Ancient Ones took their security systems. In the center of the chamber sat a crystalline structure the size of a building, pulsing with the same red light they'd seen from above. Energy arced between various components, and the whole thing hummed with power that made Jake's teeth itch. That's the engine? He asked. That's just the control interface, Cleet said, consulting his tablet. The actual engine takes up most of the planet's core. You built a city on a weapon that's inside your planet's core. Again, we didn't know at the time. How do you not notice someone hollowed out your planet? It was a very long time ago. The sacred blade suddenly pulled Jake forward, dragging him toward the crystalline structure like an excited puppy that had spotted a squirrel. Jake stumbled along, trying to keep his feet under him. Hey, easy. I'm attached to you, remember? The sword stopped in front of a panel covered in symbols that looked less like writing and more like someone had let a very aggressive artist loose with glowing paint. Okay, so this is probably important, Jake said. Cleet, what am I looking at? Professor Cleet scurried up, his 17 pairs of glasses all focusing on different parts of the panel. It's the main control interface. But there's a problem. Why is there always a problem? The controls are locked behind the 3 trials Valara mentioned. We can't just shut it down. We have to prove we're worthy first. That's the dumbest security system I've ever heard of. What if there's an emergency? I imagine the Ancient Ones didn't anticipate their security system being the emergency. A doorway opened in the far wall, revealing a chamber that was definitely not up to any building code Jake knew about. It was filled with what looked like obstacle courses designed by someone who hated fun and wanted people to suffer. Trial of Courage, Throck said, recognizing the setup. Combat trials. I've trained for these my entire life. Great, you can go first. The Chosen One must complete the trials. The Chosen One didn't ask for this job. The sword pulled Jake toward the trial chamber. Apparently it wasn't taking no for an answer. Inside, ancient mechanisms whirred to life. Holograms appeared, showing opponents in armor that looked impressive and probably expensive. Traditional warrior stuff, the kind that looked great in prophecies but wasn't very practical. Okay, Jake said, looking at the holographic warriors. So I fight these guys? You must defeat them using traditional combat techniques, Cleet explained, reading from his tablet. Honor, bravery, and martial prowess. The holographic warriors assumed fighting stances. Jake looked at them, looked at his sword, and then did something that made Throck make a strangled sound. He threw the sword. The sacred blade, stuck to his hand, yanked him forward as it flew. Jake, basically water skiing through the air behind a magic weapon, crashed into the holographic warriors like a very uncoordinated missile. The holograms, not programmed for someone using their legendary weapon as a grappling hook, flickered and shut down in confusion. Trial complete, an ancient voice announced from hidden speakers. Jake landed in a heap, groaning. The sword was still stuck to his hand, now humming with what felt like amusement. That's not how you're supposed to complete the Trial of Courage, Cleet protested. But I did complete it. You're supposed to show bravery and skill. I showed bravery by throwing myself at armed opponents, and I showed skill by not dying. That counts. Throck was making a sound like he was trying not to laugh. That was the most dishonorable combat technique I've ever seen. It was also brilliant. The next door opened, revealing the Trial of Wisdom. This chamber was filled with puzzles, ancient riddles carved into the walls, and what looked like a very complicated combination lock. This should take hours to solve, Cleet said, pulling out analysis equipment. Jake walked up to the lock and hit it with the pommel of his sword. The ancient mechanism, not having been maintained in 10,000 years, made a grinding sound and opened. Trial complete, the voice announced again. Cleet dropped his equipment. You can't just break the puzzles. Why not? The goal is to open the door, right? Doors open. The trial is supposed to test your wisdom. I wisely decided not to waste time on a broken lock. That's not wisdom, that's vandalism. It's efficient vandalism. The final door opened, revealing the Trial of Sacrifice. This chamber was different from the others, simpler, with just a single pedestal in the center. The Trial of Sacrifice requires you to give up something precious, Cleet read from his tablet. Something that has great value to you. Jake looked around the empty chamber. Like what? Usually warriors sacrifice their weapons, their honor, or sometimes they have to make impossible choices about who lives and dies. That's dark. The Ancient Ones were very dramatic. Jake walked up to the pedestal and put down the one thing he'd been carrying besides the sword. A small battered photo of his ship, the piece of junk he'd been flying for 5 years and had actually grown fond of despite its tendency to break down at the worst possible moments. I sacrifice my ship, he said. Because if this planet explodes, it's going with it anyway, so technically I'm sacrificing it right now. Throck blinked. That's surprisingly profound. Also, I already negotiated for a new one, so I'm not actually losing anything. And there's the part I expected. The pedestal accepted the photo. Trial complete. All challenges overcome. Control chamber access granted. The crystalline structure in the main chamber opened, revealing a control panel that was somehow even more complicated than everything else they'd seen. Okay, Jake said, approaching the controls. Now we just shut this thing down, right? Not exactly, Cleet said, studying the interface. The engine has already begun its charging sequence. We need to reverse the polarity of the core matrix while simultaneously realigning the dimensional stabilizers and, in normal person words, we need to press a lot of buttons in the right order very quickly or the planet explodes. Why didn't you just say that? Thruck leaned over the control panel, his military experience showing. I recognize some of these symbols, standard Ancient One's tactical systems, but the sequence is randomized. We'd need to calculate the correct pattern based on... Jake started pressing buttons. What are you doing? Cleet shrieked. You can't just randomly press buttons on a doomsday device. I'm not being random. The sword's showing me what to do. And it was. The sacred blade was feeding him information directly, highlighting which controls to activate and in what order. Apparently, being the chosen one came with at least one useful feature. Jake's hands moved across the panel, hitting controls that made the engine pulse and shift. The red glow started to fade, replaced by a calmer blue light. The humming decreased, the energy arc stopped, and the whole structure began powering down. It's actually working, Throck said, sounding genuinely surprised. Why do people keep being shocked when things work? Because you're doing everything wrong according to traditional methods, yet succeeding anyway. Maybe traditional methods are the problem. Professor Cleet was frantically recording everything. The engine's core temperature is dropping, power levels are decreasing. The dimensional field is collapsing. By all measurements, you're successfully deactivating a weapon that has baffled researchers for centuries. Cool. How long until I can let go of this sword? As if in answer, the sacred blade pulsed one final time. The glow faded to a gentle shimmer, and Jake felt his hand release from the grip. He flexed his fingers, finally free after what felt like hours, but had probably been less than one. Huh, he said, looking at the blade lying peacefully on the control panel. That wasn't so bad. You saved an entire planet. Valara's voice came from Jake's communicator, which he'd forgotten was even on. She must have been listening the whole time. You are truly the chosen one. I'm truly a guy who wants to fix his ship and get back to work. The prophecy has been fulfilled. You have faced the trials, defeated the ancient threat, and proven yourself worthy. Your name will be remembered for 10,000 years. Can I get it remembered with a decent paycheck instead? They made their way back up the 3 kilometers of stairs, which somehow felt even longer going up. By the time they reached the surface, Jake's legs were screaming at him, and he'd decided that if he ever became a legendary hero again, he was demanding escalators. The plaza was packed with even more people than before, all of them cheering and celebrating. Apparently, not being turned into space dust was a pretty good reason to party. Valara floated forward, her 6 arms raised in blessing. You have saved us all, chosen one. Name your reward, and it shall be yours. I already named my rewards. Fixed ship, fuel, food, and a signed statement saying this wasn't my fault. Surely you want something more. Glory, power, a position of honor in our society. Lady, I have a delivery deadline. Glory doesn't pay the bills. Throck clapped Jake on the shoulder with one of his 4 hands, nearly knocking him over. You know, human, you're either the wisest being I've ever met or the luckiest idiot in the galaxy. Why not both? I like your attitude. If you ever need a co-pilot, look me up. I could use some adventure that doesn't involve getting rejected by magic swords. You know what? I might take you up on that. You seem like you'd be good at moving heavy boxes. Professor Cleet was still scribbling notes, all 17 pairs of glasses reflecting the celebration lights. I'm going to write 17 papers about today, maybe 18. The applications of your problem-solving methodology could revolutionize our understanding of Ancient One's technology. Just spell my name right in the papers. Of course. Jake. Morrison. Jake Morrison. Professional cargo hauler and part-time planet saver, apparently. True to their word, the people of Carthex Prime fixed Jake's ship. They didn't just fix it, they upgraded it. New hull plating that could withstand atmospheric entry without screaming. A reactor core that actually worked. Navigation systems that wouldn't mistake asteroids for empty space. They even installed a coffee maker in the cockpit, which Jake appreciated more than any of the fancy weapon systems they tried to add. "You're sure you won't stay?" Valara asked as Jake prepared to leave. "You could lead our people, unite the galaxy, fulfill your greater destiny." "My greater destiny is delivering agricultural equipment. Someone on Deneb 7 is waiting for a shipment of hydroponic systems, and I'm already late. The galaxy needs you. The galaxy's got plenty of heroes. It's short on reliable cargo pilots." He climbed into his ship, settling into the pilot's seat that didn't creak ominously anymore. The engines powered up smoothly, without the usual concerning sounds. It was weird, having equipment that actually worked. As he lifted off, Jake took one last look at Carthex Prime, the planet that had almost been destroyed because everyone was too polite to check what was in the scary basement, the people waving at him from below, celebrating their salvation. "You know," he said to his ship's computer, "that was probably the weirdest Tuesday I've had in a while." The computer, which had also been upgraded, beeped in what might have been agreement. Still, got a new ship out of it, that's something. He punched in the coordinates for Deneb 7 and engaged the hyperdrive, leaving Carthex Prime behind. Jake made his delivery to Deneb 7 2 days late, which was actually pretty good considering he'd saved a planet in the middle of the trip. The client was annoyed about the delay until Jake explained what happened, at which point they thought he was lying and docked his pay anyway. Such was the life of a cargo pilot. He'd been back to his normal routine for about 3 weeks when he started noticing something weird. Ships would give him extra space at docking stations. Station managers would comp his docking fees without explanation. Someone had spray-painted "The Chosen One was here" on the bathroom wall of a truck stop in the Proxima system. "That's strange," Jake muttered, scrubbing at the graffiti with his sleeve. Then he started seeing the news reports. Apparently, the story of what happened on Carthex Prime had spread. But like all good stories that get passed around the galaxy, it had been improved with each retelling. According to the latest version Jake heard, he'd fought an army of ancient warriors, solved impossible riddles that had stumped scholars for millennia, and sacrificed his own ship to save billions of lives. That last part was technically true, but the way they told it made it sound way more dramatic than, "I already negotiated for a better one." The Carthex Prime Religious Council had apparently declared him the prophesied savior and had begun construction on a temple in his honor. They'd erected a statue in the plaza, showing him heroically wielding the sacred blade, looking noble and determined. The statue looked nothing like him. For one thing, it had way more muscles than Jake had ever possessed. For another, it showed him with a flowing cape, which he definitely hadn't been wearing. He'd been wearing a stained jumpsuit that smelled like engine grease and regret. "At least they spelled my name right," he said, reading the inscription on the statue's base. Then he noticed they'd added, "Morrison the Magnificent, Uniter of Worlds, Champion of the Innocent, he who made the sacred blade laugh." I didn't make it laugh. It was amused at best. His communicator pinged with another message. He'd been getting a lot of those lately. People wanting him to come save their planets, fight their battles, fulfill their prophecies. He'd ignored most of them, but this one caught his attention because it was offering actual money. "Huh," Jake said, reading the offer. "Someone needs cargo hauled through dangerous territory and specifically requested the Chosen One of Carthex Prime. They're paying triple standard rates." His ship's computer beeped questioningly. I know. I said I was done with the hero stuff. But triple rates? For just flying through some dangerous space? That's just good business." Another message came through, this one from Throck. Apparently, the big warrior had been getting his own share of attention as the Chosen One's first disciple, which was not a title he'd asked for, but was apparently stuck with. "Human," the message read. Your legend is spreading faster than a reactor meltdown. There are now 3 competing religions based on your teachings, none of which you actually taught. One of them believes you can speak to machines. Another thinks you're immortal. A third claims you're a living god who subsists entirely on coffee and spite. Jake snorted. That last one's not that far off. The message continued. If you're interested, there's good money in the mercenary business for someone with your reputation. I've already gotten 6 job offers. We could team up, make a fortune, and I wouldn't have to listen to people tell me how I should have tried harder to lift the sword. Think about it. Jake thought about it. The idea of partnering with a 4-armed warrior who actually knew how to fight, taking jobs that paid well because people thought he was some kind of legendary hero, all while doing what he did anyway, which was flying cargo through dangerous space. That's not a bad idea, he admitted. He sent a message back to Throck. You any good with navigation systems? My new ship is fancy and I don't trust it yet. The reply came back almost immediately. I'm excellent with technology. Also, I'm getting tired of people here treating me like a failure. When do we leave? Thursday, I've got a delivery. Of course you do. Over the next few months, Jake and Throck became something of a fixture in the cargo hauling business. They took jobs in dangerous territories where most pilots wouldn't go. Mostly because Jake's reputation as the chosen one meant pirates thought twice before attacking, and Throck's 4 arms meant he could load cargo 4 times as fast as anyone else. They didn't advertise themselves as heroes. They advertised themselves as a reliable shipping company with competitive rates and a surprisingly low cargo damage rate. But the legend grew anyway. Every delivery became a story. Every close call with pirates became an epic battle. That time Jake had to emergency land on an asteroid and patch the hull with spare parts became the day the chosen one tamed the stone giant of the belt. I didn't tame anything, Jake protested when he heard that version. I fixed a leak with duct tape and hope. The galaxy didn't care. It wanted heroes, and Jake had accidentally become one just by being himself. Back on Carthex Prime, the religion around the sacred blade had evolved. They'd incorporated Jake's teachings into their doctrine, which was hilarious because Jake hadn't taught them anything except maybe check what's in your basement before building on top of it. The new doctrine included such profound wisdom as, ask the sword directly instead of guessing, sometimes the simple solution is the best solution, and always negotiate your pay up front. Professor Cleet had published his 18 papers, which had revolutionized archaeological studies across 12 systems. His central thesis, that maybe the ancient ones weren't as mysterious as everyone thought, and people just needed to try the obvious solutions first, had made him famous in academic circles. Valara had stepped down as High Priestess, claiming that the prophecy had been fulfilled and her work was done. She'd been replaced by a younger priest who had revolutionary ideas like, maybe we should actually read all the warning labels, and perhaps we should stop building important things on top of mysterious ancient chambers. The sacred blade itself had been placed in a new temple, behind protective glass with security systems that would make a military base jealous. They weren't taking any chances of someone accidentally activating another doomsday device. According to the reports Jake occasionally read, the blade would sometimes glow when cargo ships passed overhead. The priests interpreted this as the blade remembering its chosen one and blessing his journeys. Jake interpreted it as a magic sword with a sense of humor. A year after the incident, Jake received an official invitation to return to Carthex Prime for the anniversary celebration of the Day of Salvation. They wanted him to give a speech, accept honors, maybe stick around for a parade. He sent back a polite decline, citing a delivery schedule that couldn't be interrupted. The real reason was that he'd seen enough religious ceremonies to last a lifetime, and he'd probably say something that would accidentally start another religion. You know, Throck said one day as they hauled a shipment of mining equipment through the outer rim, we're never going to escape your legend. People are always going to remember you as the chosen one. Yeah, probably, Jake agreed. But at least we're making good money off it. Is that all that matters to you, the money? Jake thought about that. No, but it's a nice bonus. Mostly I just like flying cargo, meeting weird people, seeing weird places, accidentally saving planets every now and then. You saved one planet. One's a good start. You're not going to save anymore? I'm not going to go looking for planets to save. But if I happen to crash on one that needs saving, I guess I'll help out, as long as they pay for ship repairs. Throck laughed, that deep rumbling sound that Jake had gotten used to over the past year. You're the most reluctant hero the galaxy has ever seen. Someone's got to balance out all those eager ones. They flew in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars streak past. Jake's coffee maker beeped, letting him know his next cup was ready. The ship's systems hummed smoothly, running better than any ship he'd ever flown. His communicator pinged with another job offer. Another planet in need of the Chosen One's help. Another opportunity to become more legendary. Jake looked at it, then deleted it. He had a delivery to make, and that was heroic enough for him. Somewhere in the galaxy, on a planet he'd saved without meaning to, people were praying to his statue and telling stories about his greatness. They were attributing wisdom to him that he'd never claimed, and powers he definitely didn't have. And Jake Morrison, cargo pilot and accidental savior, was perfectly fine with them doing that as long as they left him alone to do his job. The sacred blade of infinite destiny, locked away in its temple, pulsed with what might have been contentment. It had chosen well, even if its chosen one would never admit it. After 10,000 years of waiting for a noble warrior who would embrace destiny with courage and honor, it had found something better. It had found a human who treated prophecies like inconvenient paperwork and saved the galaxy because he happened to be in the neighborhood. And honestly, that was way more entertaining.